but there were times I had to get him man to man.
And your favorite team that you guys love to face in your division?
Yours.
Yes, sir.
Like the games like you play against the Raiders, you might get 3 sacks when they had Jamarcus Russell, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I got 3 sacks on them. I got 3 sacks on them in the first half, right?
Yeah.
And I'm ready, and they take Tommy Maddox.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to West War Room Rivals. Today we have a special guest on the show, but to get started out, we're going to do a little roll call. So over here, I don't know if I'm pointing the right way. I always get it mixed up. But I have Austin and Corey, the Shovik brothers, representing Chiefs and Broncos country. And then down below, we got Matt representing Broncos country and Cody representing and Cody representing Raider Nation. So yeah, I'm super excited for today. And then also I got to give a shout out to all of our sponsors. So we have Vidi Coffee. You can get your coffee on Amazon or Vidi's website. Feel free to if you don't have the link, I'm sure we'll post the link somewhere. So definitely check that out. We also rival codes. I don't know if you can see Austin over here, but Austin's got his rival code shirt on. Use codes Rivals10 for 10% off your purchase today. We also have Field Ops. Get all your field marking needs. Field Ops Kansas with Troy and the crew. We also have Emporia State Federal Credit Union, the War Room's banking of choice, as well as the Shovik's banking of choice. And then the studio, JBW Solutions. Shout out to JBW Solutions. Excuse my mix-up, but I'm super excited. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alex Insdorf. Super excited.
Oh, hold on. There we are.
Oh, what's up, guys?
Hold on. There we go.
There we go.
What up, Alex? How you doing, buddy?
Good.
You excited? Hopefully.
Yeah. I don't know what I've gotten really into here, but yeah, I'm excited.
All right.
Yeah, no, we're really excited for this, and again, we're going to help Caleb get through his first hosting duties of the night. So, Caleb, we'll go ahead and let you get it kicked off with the first segment, and it's basically just going to talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I guess to get you started, so for fans who may not know who you are, I obviously know who you are. I'm a big fan, love watching your stuff. So for fans who may not know your work yet, can you briefly explain what you do with Bolt Breakdowns and the Guilty as Charged podcast?
Yeah, so no, I do a show on there once a week, just kind of covering the team, interviewing, talking to people as well, particularly during the offseason, getting ready for free agency and draft stuff when we're not in season. So if you want to check out that over on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel, you can check that out there. And then during the season, I do a lot of stuff for Bolt Beat, covering press conferences, all that kind of stuff, and watching the games, watching the tape. So you can follow me over on Twitter at Alex Insdorf 99 down there.
Nice. Alex, I got a follow-up question. What inspired you to start a Chargers podcast, or how did you kind of find your way in the podcasting realm?
It's a good question. We started at Bolt Beat, which was the blog in 2017, and then it was actually 2020. This is pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
California had basically passed a law that I'm not from California, but my co-hosts who are from there, they couldn't make some amount of money. There was some law that basically dictated like the amount of work they could do as contractors. Then I was like, well, if you can't work there, you can try podcasting. And that was sort of how that idea started for them. I came on a little bit later in that year in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, ever since then, it's just been 6 years of, watching, commentating, doing all the stuff for the team. So it just kind of taught me the lesson, if one thing doesn't work out, right, something might present itself later down the road. And obviously it's opened up a lot of opportunities for us.
Do you ever look back at your early episodes and see how far you guys have come? And then for us, for example, behind the scenes, people don't realize how much work goes behind a podcast, especially one that you put a lot of energy and time into. Like, do you remember some like frustrations or funny moments that like made the journey up to today still enjoyable and not like close up shop?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sure episodes 5 or 6 years ago were terrible. I don't know how people listen to them. So there was definitely a lot of development in that regard. But even just we kind of did a lot of stuff without understanding how it worked. Like, okay, why do you need a good mic? Why do you need to spend money on that? Or just editing stuff, or when it comes to we used to record on Zoom during the pandemic, since that was like such a big app back then. And then I remember there was one episode after we blew like a 21-point lead to Drew Lock. I forgot to hit record one. So we just talked for like 30 minutes and recorded an episode without me actually hitting the record button like I was supposed to. So there were a lot of moments back in the day where, we definitely came a long way. But I mean, I also don't think you get anywhere in this business without failing, I guess, and kind of falling on your face at first and then kind of learning how to ride the bike a little bit from there.
Oh, I couldn't tell you how many Zoom podcasts I did where we forgot to hit record and we go hour and a half deep. Nothing's filmed at all. So you got to start over and you don't have the same take as you did the first go around.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought that was the first question. When you look back at the past Chargers season, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind and why?
I'd say first word or phrase. I would say close, I guess, is kind of what I would say in terms of like what they need to do to be a contender, right? I think you saw the recipe of what they could do on defense. Offensively, though, that is where they were limited, obviously, in that Patriots game. Had one of the better defensive efforts against them this postseason, up there with what the Texans and the Broncos kind of were able to do, but, didn't have the points to show for it. And, when you put up 3 points in a playoff game, your offensive coordinator gets fired, you move on to Mike McDaniel, and you try to reset the deck from there. And that's what I think Jim Harbaugh has kind of moved on to in terms of trying to do anything possible to make this team a Super Bowl contender. So that's where we're kind of at right now. But obviously a lot of other roster things in terms of free agency and all that stuff needs to get going as well as for every other team in the AFC West who has needs.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we've heard any word, phrase, or description about the season that didn't involve injuries or hospital or, something like that. So I kind of like that different perspective, right? That, I was kind of expecting injured or health or something. And I like to
I think injuries definitely played a part, right, in terms of how the team looked at the end of the year. But also, I think even if this current, they didn't have Slater and all most of the season, you can go through the list of injuries for sure. But I also think this team was probably a few steps away, even if they did have all of those guys, in terms of being able to compete, for a Super Bowl title, in terms of just a couple of the things that were missing. So, for sure, if they have Slater and Alt, do I think the offense looks different this year? Yeah. Do I think a Greg Roman offense that gets it done at the end of the day, even with those two? Not really. So it kind of depends on how you look at it, I guess.
And I'm not sure what the final number looked like as far as like offensive line combinations that the Chargers use, but I'm not too sure that I think any NFL team that had to use that amount of combinations of offensive linemen, again, for what they were able to still accomplish with having to shuffle literally all 5 guys every single game, I don't think any other team would, play as well as Justin Herbert did probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you also saw in that wild card game, I think, and Chris Collinsworth kind of noted it on the broadcast, which was the Chargers, kind of had decent protection for the first half. But Justin Herbert the whole season has had to play a lot of hero ball behind that offensive line, and I think kind of didn't settle into some of the pockets that were there just because out of kind of the fear that like, hey, I need to make a play because this offensive line wasn't going to hold up, and they didn't get it going in the first half. And then the second half, when the offensive line finally did implode, I think that also obviously cost them to a great deal.
Yeah.
So in this season where obviously you just mentioning some of the things that the Chargers could have done better, or, you know, things that you're pointing out that maybe if had this changed, it's a different perspective, but what did this team do better than people give them credit for this past season?
I think offensively, like you just mentioned with the injuries, right? Everything that they went through when you're down to your, you know, third or fourth running back in Kamani Vidal, who like obviously stepped up in a big way. When you're down the amount of offensive linemen, you were the group on defense went through a bunch of injuries this season, and yet they still kind of kept putting up production and were a top 10 unit in the league. So I think when you look at the coaching and obviously putting players in positions to win, I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit there, even if they didn't get to their kind of final goal, because I don't know how many coaches in the league do the job that Jim Harbaugh did with this team this year, and how many quarterbacks do kind of what Justin Herbert was able to do with this team, and how bad things looked every week, especially that final 4 or 5 game win streak they had kind of to pull away for that wild card spot. So from that standpoint, I think they do deserve a lot of credit, especially with what it looked like the season would be after the Jags game, and they lost 35-6 and then ripped off 4 or 5 straight wins. So I think there was a bunch of times where the team was pretty resilient, where they could have thrown the towel kind of on the season. And so for that, I think the players and the coaches deserve a bunch of credit. But, you know, when you are holding together a skeleton squad, so to speak, with the injuries, there does come a time where the playoffs expose a lot of your weaknesses. And I think that is what happened in that wild card game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So my question kind of ties into Cody's question. Aside from like all the injuries, what are some other reoccurring issues that you saw on tape or in the numbers?
Yeah. I think for me, it was definitely the downfield passing game was a story really in the last 4 or 5 weeks, where you would just watch on tape and you would have receivers running to the same spot, receivers running the same routes. Very much what we saw with Greg Roman in Baltimore. And I think a lot of players definitely hit a certain point on offense where they were frustrated towards the end of the year. Some of them said that publicly. Some of them didn't say that publicly. But to me, the offensive deterioration and the defense kind of having to bail them out every single game, or Justin Herbert having to make those 1 or 2 magical plays he did, like in the Eagles game or the Chiefs game. I think you just get to a point where if you're not putting up consistent offense, relying on that is kind of unsustainable. So that to me is just getting the offensive line better going forward, of course, making an offense that I think is more consistent week to week, especially after losing Jesse Minter to the Ravens, right? You don't know exactly what you're going to get out of that DC spot next season. That to me, I think, and that's why I think they ultimately brought in Mike McDaniel, is let's stabilize our offense a little bit, have a little bit more in that department next year, so that if we do have some defensive drop off from losing Jesse Minter or losing maybe a couple guys on defense, then, you know, we can also kind of balance that out by maximizing the offense, which they didn't do this year.
So I have a 2-parter real quick. I do want to talk about this Patriots game real quick, because this is a game that I actually thought the Chargers might actually win.
Yeah.
It looks throughout the game that defense played their ass off and they kept them in the game. And Caleb, credit to Caleb about talking that defensive line for the Patriots, he actually liked that matchup with the beat up offensive line for the Chargers. But there were plenty of times, and I've seen Charger fans talk about it on social media, so I want to get your perspective. Did it look like they were just unprepared, or maybe they were just kind of playing vanilla offense?
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't say they were unprepared. I would just say if you're not a very disciplined offense throughout the season, I think then your weaknesses come in the playoffs, right? They get that pick on Drake May, right? Yep. Right at the beginning of the game, have, 4 chances to put up 7 in the end zone, and they didn't. And they didn't hand the ball off one time to Kamani Vidal, who had been pretty good on the goal line, throughout the year. there was a little bit of a miscommunication with Keenan Allen on that drive. So I think it's less that they weren't prepared and more the very small attention to details you need in those goal-to-go situations. They weren't a very good red zone team all year in terms of finishing drives like that. Those are the kinds of things that cost you in these playoff games, and it's the difference between being up 7-0 in that game and what ended up happening.
Yeah, and again, I thought you can't come away with no points after a turnover and you set your offense up that close. I mean, you're on the road. You got to take advantage of having the ball that close into the red zone because we saw it with the Broncos. They Stidham turned the ball over, and the Patriots right away turned that into a touchdown. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that those do make a difference. So my next question is: was there a point this season where the team's direction became clear to you? Because obviously it was the Chargers and Broncos basically neck and neck the whole time. But when did it become clear to you?
I think to me that 4-week stretch after the loss in Jacksonville was like pretty telling of like the resilience that this team had for sure. But the limitation in terms of their playoff ceiling, like I said, was just kind of, you would see a game like Houston where the offense just wasn't, dialed in, like the Jacksonville game where they just kind of didn't get off the bus. And when you have a bunch of those sorts of efforts where they're not a terrible offense. I think they finished the season 18th or something like that, but they were 24th in red zone efficiency, right? And it's just very hard to win playoff games like that unless you are, I can't think of, maybe like the 07 Giants or something like that. That's kind of the team that you really need to be if you're just having an otherworldly defense and you get a little bit luckier on the offensive side of the ball. And so it's just, especially in the modern NFL where you have a bunch of these teams that can put up points, not that sustainable of a way to win from game to game. So I think it's about, you have the defense, you have the personnel on defense to compete next year, but it's about getting this offense to something that can compete for a playoff or for a Super Bowl like we've seen with, Seattle and New England, as the teams this year.
So in your opinion, with how the offense went, is this injury plagued or is it a mix of the injuries and maybe OC game plan?
I think it's both. To me, Greg Roman had definitely worn out his welcome by the end of the year. And I think even if they put up, 16 points or even if they, maybe even won that Patriots game, to be honest, I still think he probably would have been out as a result of just what the players had gone through this year and the way that the players had just kind of said that they felt like directionless kind of on offense throughout the year. So I think it's a mix of that and the injuries. And, I do think there is at the very least fair criticism of Herbert for this game. I did say that on Twitter and then within 10 minutes I had 150 replies. It's like, okay, no, I still love the guy, but we have to call stinker. And it was, it was a little bit of a playoff dropping performance. Granted, again, the surroundings around him weren't great. I wouldn't say it was like his worst playoff game, maybe compared to Houston last year. But I do think going forward, even, when the team around him is like an A+ Super Bowl contender, Justin Herbert kind of can't bring his C- game, if you want to call it that, to the playoffs. So I think that also mixes into sort of the dysfunction we're talking about on offense, which is, there's a very high standard for Herbert in the regular season and like what he's asked to do. That does at some point, hopefully with a better team next year, also to have to translate to the postseason.
Yeah. So I completely agree. And I do want to translate or kind of transfer over to off-season priorities. So I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts on this. I know what my thoughts are, but I really want to hear your thoughts. I know some of your thoughts from watching your show recently. And then we'll also get into free agency and the draft as well. But my next question is, if you were running the Chargers front office, what would be your top priorities?
I mean, the first one has to be the offensive line. Like you can't be the 32nd ranked pass blocking team this year, 31st in run blocking. if you want to play Jim Harbaugh football, if you want to play Mike McDaniel football, like that's just not sustainable throughout the whole season. And we've never really seen a team with that bad of an offensive line that I can remember that's ever won a Super Bowl or won anything big. And so that does mean probably spending in free agency. Maybe you can go get a Tyler Linderbaum out there, Connor McGovern, plenty of guys in free agency, plenty of guys in the draft at both at center and guard spots. And you get Joe Alt, you get Slater back next year. But that's why I hesitate, again, to blame injuries for this year, because I think going into it, bringing back Bradley Bozeman was a mistake. Kai Becton signing clearly didn't pan out. So to me, the number one priority of the offseason has to be offensive line, whatever combination that ends up being through free agency and the draft, the dollar figures on those contracts. They have the cap space to do it. They have something like $82-88 million in cap space currently. So you got to get that done. Obviously, to create a sustainable playoff offense, but also when it comes to protecting Justin Herbert, these last 5 or 6 years, Justin Herbert has been hit at a rate that rivals Andrew Luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of the number of hits and sacks he's taken. And so at some point you have to protect your top investment. And to me, that is all about offensive line, which I think last year they deserve some criticism for not going in harder on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So would you also, just on that topic, would you maybe even prioritize like a swing tackle or a couple backup tackles? Obviously, I know he's not a free agent, but you're not going to spend money on like a Trent Williams type backup, but would you go get a swing tackle that you would feel way more confident in, kind of just to guard yourself there as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard throughout the league to really like have swing tackles and swing guards. Like,
yeah,
I think they can pinch in for like a game, right? But when you're playing with swing tackles and guards consistently throughout the season, like it is just very hard to win that way for any team. But I do think, getting better depth is certainly a big thing. And past the starting line this offseason, they have like 4 or 5 of their backups that are basically free agents this year. And so in addition to figuring out who's going to play center, who's going to play left guard, right guard, they also have to figure out like some of these depth swing tackle guard situations, because Trevor Penning is a free agent, Austin Deculus is a free agent, Trey Pipkins is a free agent, so on and so forth. So they have a lot of not just getting starters, but like you said, getting those backup depth options too.
Yeah, as a Chiefs fan, I know all about the tackle issues. And you're right, you feel like you have a decent backup. But again, they're good in a pinch, but if they have to play extended time, they'll get exposed, right? Like,
right.
There's a reason they're a backup or a swing tackle. So yeah, that makes sense. But we'll transition into free agency a little bit. So what other position groups should the Chargers be most aggressive with in free agency? Outside of the offense, obviously the offensive line, but what other positions or position groups?
I think for when I look at this free agent class, I would like to see maybe some defensive line investment. Obviously, they're going to have to spend some money to bring back Adafe Owe, who's one of the top edges on the market. So that's going to cost a decent amount of money. Do you want to bring Khalil Mack back, right? Like that's going to cost probably, I think PFF projected him at like 1 year, $14 million. So that's going to be a decent chunk of the cap too, if you want to bring him back. And then I do want to find maybe a pass rushing defensive tackle, because I think they have a lot of good quality nose tackles, but they don't necessarily have that pass rushing presence on the interior that we see with a lot of other playoff teams, like a kind of a Leonard Williams, Jalen Carter, Chris Jones type of presence in Kansas City, right? Where you have one of those guys on the interior who's able to make the job for the rest of the defensive line easier. Not that that's very easy to find in free agency, obviously, but whether that's free agency or the draft, I would like to see them find a little bit more pass rushing presence at the interior defensive tackle spot too.
And I think that was such an underrated acquisition of Owe when they got him. So I mean, if I'm the Chargers, I'm making it a priority to keep him, because
absolutely
that's a motor, and he can get to the quarterback. And he, again, I don't remember what the stretch was, but that like what the last 3 or 4 games, he was just like always at the quarterback. He was a high motor guy, and that's the kind of guys that you need on that defense right now.
Yeah, and I think to me, we've gotten questions about like, is he kind of a Jesse Minter merchant, right? And then like,
Right.
oh, if Minter leaves, then is he going to be good? He's had 50 pressures each of the last 3 years. So to me, like he's had sustainable production. It's just a matter of like, has he been getting the sacks or not? In any individual season, he had 7.5 sacks the moment he came over for the Chargers in week 6, and then had 3 sacks in that playoff game, which was absolutely massive. He and Will Anderson gave Drake May problems, or gave Will Campbell problems for Drake May. So I think, to me, you also just 27-year-old edge rushers that are, as physically fast and as strong as he is, don't grow on trees either. So I think you also want to keep those around, and those are very hard to find throughout the league in general. So I do think the Chargers, whether they have to overpay or, get whatever contract they agree to, is probably going to be a little bit more favorable to Owe, but that is what a star edge rusher costs in the league.
So let me kind of one more follow-up with this one, because I think, Caleb, you're going to have to help me with this name. You know who I'm talking about, the edge rusher. Tui.
Yeah, Tuli Pelotu.
Him. So let me ask you, would you prioritize re-signing, what's his name, Owe, and pairing him with Tuli, and then kind of cutting your losses with Mac, just because you have that young duo? Or do you want to prioritize both of them and kind of have all three to lean on?
I think, to me, the Mac question is kind of separate, because I think with Mac, he'll decide whether he wants to, he could retire. He's considered retirement since 2023. Or he could decide, hey, Jesse Minter's going to Baltimore. Maybe I'll go to Baltimore too, right? So he'll have his options in free agency if he does indeed want to leave. So I think the Mac question is kind of separate. If Khalil Mack wants to be back, I think the Chargers will make that happen in any event. But I think there's a way that you can have all three on the roster. There's a way you can do 2 of the 3 on the roster if Mac wants to leave, kind of like you said. But I do think the top priority is Owe, regardless of kind of what Mac ends up deciding.
Is there a type of free agent move that might not be flashy, but it's going to make a huge impact on the Chargers if they make that move?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about like offensive line, which is not necessarily like acquiring a top wide receiver or something along those lines. So I do think, again, going along the offensive line, that's kind of a like non-flashy thing you could do to boost your team. But I do think they have the bodies on defense currently to be able to compete, in addition to bringing back like Owe and some of those guys that are free agents that I mentioned. Outside of that, I do think they kind of need a blocking tight end somewhere. Aronde Gadsden, great pass catcher, but I also do think they need sort of that Y mold of tight end to be able to be a blocker, to be able to run the Jim Harbaugh offense, but also run the Mike McDaniel offense a little bit. So I do think they are kind of sneakily maybe in need of another tight end, even though they did get great production out of Gadsden this year.
So I kind of mine is a 2-parter, I guess. Kind of wanted to follow up with it. So the Chargers do have the 22nd pick in the draft this year. Is there a particular player that you have your eye on that you hope falls that far into the draft, into the first round?
Yeah, I'd say, to me, the clubhouse leader right now would have to be Olaiva Vega Ione out of Penn State. I think if you can get him, questions about like scheme fit with Mike McDaniel for sure compared to what he played out of Penn State, but he's probably the best guard that you can get at that spot before maybe you take like a center in the later rounds or something. But if you're just talking about getting one of the best pure guards in this draft, I do think it starts with him. Or you could go for somebody like a Caleb Banks, or someone who's going to be there on the defensive side of the ball as well. One of those pass rushing DTs that we saw like at the Senior Bowl last week. But to me, if you're talking clubhouse leader in January, and all the stuff could change by the combine, and all the stuff that will change with these stocks and where players are projected to go, I do think clubhouse leader for the Chargers, if you're just talking about that pick in a vacuum, would probably be Ione out of Penn State.
Yeah, Yeah, and the draft's weird because you never know how the board's going to fall. And you guys are kind of in that no man's area of there could be some teams that trade up, right? They're interested in trading up, or maybe they see someone that the Chargers maybe not want. But with that being said, what would be the chances of maybe them leaning on best available at that point in that position, maybe pushing the guard to the next round?
It's definitely possible. I mean, obviously, it depends on what they do in free agency as well, right? If you spend a bunch of center and guard in free agency, that kind of takes the urgency on doing that in the first round, right? Takes it a little bit off, right? So then that gives you more options as to, you know, not being pigeonholed into making an offensive line pick first round. You know, they entertained conversations with the Eagles last year, I think it was, to potentially trade back from the Hampton spot after Pittsburgh took Derek Harmon. So to me, it's not impossible that something could happen similarly this year if one of those teams comes calling. They only have, I think, 5 draft picks this year, if I'm not mistaken. So then if you want to trade back, get an extra 6th or 7th pick in the draft that you can sort of add to your draft capital, I think they would consider it, certainly this year, with being a little pick deficient compared to last year for sure.
Yeah,
You know,
so go ahead, Matt. My bad.
I was saying, you know, with that said, what positions, you know, you again, like you said, you only have 5 picks in this year's draft. So what positions do you think need to be prioritized heading into the draft with 5 picks?
Yeah, I think you want to take advantage of the defensive talent in this draft and get some bodies. I think a sneaky need for them is kind of linebacker. I don't know how early you want to attack that necessarily. But I think that could be one of the positions they take off the board just because you don't know what you're getting out of Junior Colson. Dayon didn't have the best year by his standards. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they went that way at some point in the draft. But I do think you're talking about getting a couple defensive bodies, and then outside of offensive line, which we've talked about, you're talking about maybe bringing in another tight end. I also wouldn't mind maybe a wide receiver or running back who has some kick return ability, because they were one of the worst kick return, punt return teams this year. Just didn't generate that much outside of the blocking units on special teams and the punt defense and the kick defense. So I definitely think they need to set themselves up in better field position, and that might mean moving on from Darius Davis, who's been their returner over the last 3 years. So I wouldn't mind going for someone like Iowa's Caden Weechin, who's a wide receiver returner, kind of specialist guy. There's a bunch of them throughout the draft that have played a bunch of special teams, but I do think returner is also kind of a need for them as well.
Yeah, so I completely agree. I think that was an area of our team that we didn't really unlock at all this year, like you were saying. And what's weird is, so I keep having Charger fans, they comment to me that they think we need a guy in the secondary. Personally, I do not think so. Maybe a depth piece, personally, is what I think. But I want to hear your thoughts on, like, do you think we need a piece in the secondary? Do you think we're good there? What are your thoughts there?
I think the secondary is built out well enough to the point where you don't have to draft somebody. But like we were talking about with, like, best player available, right? If there is a corner that you like in round 2 or round 3, I don't think you don't take that guy, I guess is what I'm saying. So then you can rotate guys around, right? Derwin plays a bunch at slot corner right now anyway, right? So then you have a little bit of flexibility with what you can do in the cornerback and safety rooms. I think they have a bunch of good corners, right? Tarheeb still, Cam Hart played very well this year. But if you do, find a corner that you like in those first, like, 3 rounds or something like that, I wouldn't take that completely off the table, although it's definitely not like a big free agent spendy position this year for sure.
Yeah. So I was kind of along the same lines personally. I think we really need to go trench heavy. But I guess transitioning over into my next topic is coaching staff. So what excites you most about Mike McDaniel as the new OC, specifically with Justin Herbert, but overall too?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely just giving Justin Herbert easy throws, right? He is a very good screen designer, is very good at catching defenses off guard with some of the timing stuff he does. We saw this with Tua in Miami for years, obviously, in terms of maximizing that situation. I think also the Chargers can provide him the offensive line infrastructure that like he didn't necessarily have in Miami if they spend correctly this year, making his offense more in line kind of with that San Francisco offense that we saw with him and Kyle Shanahan for a number of years. So I think that's exciting. I also think it's exciting to just have a play caller that you feel is kind of going to get the best out of your players. And that was my big criticism with Greg Roman towards the end, is just you look at how Jesse Minter was elevating pretty much every player that played on defense, even if it was a UDFA guy. And by contrast, that just wasn't happening with Greg Roman. So I think elevating, kind of the floor of the defense and even the players that aren't that great, like that to me is the exciting part about somebody like Mike McDaniel, who takes Darren Waller, who had been retired for like 2 years, off the streets, and it's like, all right, you're just going to go play tight end for us in this offense. And he put up like 200 yards in those last couple games or something. So I think how easy he can make offense for players of all ilks, I think that is kind of the most interesting thing definitely about this hire.
So with this, and obviously the Chargers don't have what speed-wise that the Dolphins have. Do you think that maybe affect the offensive flow a little bit, or do you think that he's able to kind of adjust to what the Chargers may have or what they may bring in?
I think he could definitely adjust. Obviously, there will be some speed that they want to get, maybe in the draft or free agency, or they'll be linked to like certain kinds of receivers. I don't think they would do like a Tyreek Hill or anything along that nature with him getting cut. But I think there are guys that could be fits in free agency and the draft to boost the speed of the offense a little bit. You're probably not bringing Keenan Allen back. At this age, I do think you want to get a little bit younger and have a little bit more speed. So to me, that is what I would say. Also, San Francisco, like the personnel was not necessarily like heavily speed based either. So I think, I think Mike McDaniel said this week, or it was last week when he did his press conference, like he didn't even really know the main RPO thing that they used for Tua in Miami before he got there. He stole that from like the Texans playbook with Deshaun Watson, right? So I think to me, he's smart enough to just pull things kind of from other offenses that he's seen before, that I don't think the lack of speed guys is going to be a problem, but I do think it is something they could look to definitely add in the draft and free agency.
So with the Mike McDaniel hire, what I'm curious about is, was that like when he became available from Miami, was he your personal choice that you wanted as OC, or was there another offensive mind out there that maybe you thought would have helped Justin Herbert more? And again, we have no idea if Mike McDaniel is going to work or it's going to be a home run. I think we're all just anticipating it, but was there another was there another offensive coordinator that maybe you thought would fit better than Mike McDaniel? Was Mike McDaniel your choice once he became available?
No, he was number one guy for me the whole time. I think the question was like, would Jim Harbaugh kind of bend on the offense that like he's willing to do? And every season he's been in the NFL, it's been Greg Roman, ever since San Francisco. So I think him willing to give control of the offense to Mike McDaniel and just say, hey, do your thing with whatever personnel you want. We're going to get it. I think that is actually a pretty big step for him. But for me, Mike McDaniel was the most obvious choice, because even if he's going to be a head coach next year, right, and he takes interviews, this offense has to be modernized, I think, for other OCs to want this job, kind of after Mike McDaniel, with how much of the NFL around the league runs Shanahan McVay schemes. And I do think that is ultimately what you're bringing in somebody like Mike McDaniel to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next one, Chris O'Leary, feels like an underrated hire, according to Caleb. What stands out about him as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, so he was obviously Chargers safeties coach in 2024. knows the Jesse Minter scheme, I would say, by the back of his hand. Whether he can call it or not at the NFL level as a DC, right? That remains to be seen. But like, he was tasked with Elijah Molden, got traded a week or two before in 2024 to the Chargers, onboarded him into the safety room, and he had one of his best seasons. I even think of Marcus May, who got signed as a safety to the practice squad. 4 days later, he had an interception in the end zone on Kirk Cousins, right? Like, he had his safety group ready to play, and whether you were there the whole season or whether you got there 4 days ago, he had those guys definitely tutored up on the Jesse Minter defense and what he was supposed to do. So I think from that standpoint, I think he's kind of an exciting hire. And then he went to college. He had the year of DCing at Western Michigan. They went from, I think, 114th to 18th in the country this year in total defense, or it was 108th to 14th, something like that. So to me, like, you saw the year as a play caller, and Jim Harbaugh has been historically very good at finding these young guys, John Harbaugh as well, Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, that came through the pipeline in Baltimore to Michigan back to the NFL. So I think, to me, I do trust Jim on this hire, even though it is obviously uncertain whether he's going to be good or not compared to, an established DC. But Jim also took that risk when he brought Jesse Minter here from college, right? So to me, I think I definitely trust Jim hiring those younger defensive guys a little bit more than maybe some of the offensive choices he's made in the past, for sure.
Yeah, so I have a quick follow-up. Mm-hmm. So we're having Alex Molden on next week. Okay. So I'm pretty excited that, since you mentioned Elijah Molden, and he said he would talk a little bit about his transition to the Chargers and that kind of thing. So I'm pretty excited to hear about that. But also, I had a hot take, and these guys thought I was crazy. But I want to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think that with Chris O'Leary, do you think it's possible for our defense to take another step forward, kind of back where they were back in 2024? Or do you think we definitely drop? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to account for probably some level of drop, but I don't think it's like impossible that they end up, better or taking a step forward. I just think we've seen that defense year to year in the NFL is a little bit more inconsistent. And when you lose a play caller, that can be huge. But, or you could have worse injury luck year to year, right? All that kind of stuff. I don't think it's impossible that they're better, but to me, and this is one of the reasons I prioritize, like, bringing back Owe, maybe bringing back Khalil Mack, is you want to avoid some of that defensive drop-off from, not having the coordinator there to help someone like O'Leary, who's going to be DCing in his first NFL season. So I don't really think it'll be like a big drop-off, but, if they were 7th in total defense last year, if they end up, top 15 instead of like top 10, I would consider that a win. The drop off just can't be more than that, right? And so to me, remains to be seen. I don't know if they're going to be better with Chris O'Leary, because that is a lot to ask of a guy as young as he is coming in the NFL. But I think the ceiling is still pretty high with the defensive talent he has there.
So Butch Barry obviously was with Mike McDaniel in Miami, and he comes over and now is your guys' new offensive line coach for the Chargers. What does Butch Barry bring as the new O-line coach, and how realistic do you see the improvement up front?
Yeah, so I mean, I think O-line is just kind of, coaching is a big part of it, but obviously it is a talent-heavy, position too, where you do have to take those guys early in the draft, spend the money in free agency. But I think Butch Barry kind of did the best he could with Miami, given the situation. The Dolphins were 30th in offensive line spending, during his time there. They have developed Aaron Brewer at center, who is one of the finalists for Protector of the Year, All-Pro nomination. They developed Patrick Paul, who was a good story this year as well. So I think in terms of the development there, they went into the season this year not knowing whether Teron Armstead, who was their tackle, was going to play, and then he retired. It was a weird situation in Miami, but when you consider the amount of success stories they had this year, how well they were still able to run the ball, too. They were 9th in EPA per rush, up there with the Steelers and the Cowboys. They were able to make the best out of a bad situation. And to me, that was kind of the criticism of this previous coaching staff, was they just couldn't maximize, some of the other guys on the offensive line once Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt went down talent-wise. And so I think Butch Barry at least has experience doing that, even when the front office in Miami didn't necessarily give him a ton to work with.
So talking about Justin Herbert a little bit here, what areas do you think that he's like very underrated or misunderstood, like across the league?
To me, I would say it's really the improvisational playmaking kind of stuff, where he, that Eagles game, he just took it over running with his legs, right? Like he knew no one was getting open downfield. He's stiff arming guys with broken hands. It was just a very weird game for the Chargers offensively, but he takes over in those moments, I think, where he needs to, or he knows he's not getting enough from his offense. I think the thing that hurt him a little bit going into the playoffs this year was having to do stuff like that too often, to the point where then he was kind of in that game bailing on some clean pockets. So I think that's a situation where the Chargers obviously have to support him with the offensive line. Don't make him feel like he has to do everything on offense. But I do think those moments where, you'll see him take 3 steps to the right and uncork like a 60-yard deep ball, like that's the kind of thing that just quarterbacks that Mahomes and the Josh Allens of the world can do. And he's talented enough to do it. And we saw it 2020, his rookie year, and all that kind of stuff too. But I think the improvisational part of his game, and being able to kind of pick his game up when the offensive line or other things are kind of crumbling around him, I do think that's the thing he doesn't get necessarily enough credit for around the league.
Definitely. And Corey and I kind of remember it too, the first matchup this season, and that go-ahead touchdown to Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
And Nick Bonito and I think Zach Allen had him dead to right.
Yeah.
And he just somehow managed to get that ball and find Keenan Allen in the end zone. So
yeah,
I can agree with that one. Yeah.
And I think with that one real quick, were you surprised maybe of the back end of the season after the injuries that we knew of, obviously the hand and some of these were you surprised at how many like QB design runs that they still would call, putting him in position to, continuously take hits?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't think that was like a great idea. But obviously, Justin Herbert is the kind of guy where he's going to take off and scramble, even if it's like not, necessarily the best option. But I do think he will, kind of eke out and get the ball going when he has to. The big problem, I do think, is like they just didn't have the downfield, receiving game this year, and guys weren't getting open. So it's like too many times he did have to play make and kind of create for himself in those regards. So they won the Eagles game, but yeah, I didn't love that he had to like stiff arm Reed Blankenship's helmet with a broken hand. I'm like, probably would have been better if we could have avoided stuff like that. But that is just who Justin Herbert kind of is.
Yeah, and last one for me is if everything goes right, so let's say they knock it out of the park this offseason, and obviously the Chiefs, Broncos are going to be right there. No one's worried about the Raiders quite yet, but what's the realistic ceiling for the Chargers heading into next season?
If you get the offensive line right, like I do think this is a AFC champion Super Bowl level team that can compete with the other teams in the AFC. To me, compared to necessarily the top of the NFC this year, like I think the Patriots and the Broncos, all those teams are very good. I think they also have holes that can be, kind of poked at, much like the Chargers did this postseason too. So I don't think there's like an overwhelming dominant team that's just going to run the AFC for years. So I think if the Chargers address some of the positions we've talked about already, that they can be in that mix next year for sure.
It's really cool. Alex, I've got one last question before we let Caleb close out the show with you.
Mhm.
So during this first season that we as a show have kind of had, we've kind of gone through our ebbs and flows of being a fan. And so for season 2, we're going into season 2 with the hashtag be a fan. And a lot of that was inspired by when we do TikTok lives, when we go live on YouTube, sometimes we'll get fandoms in the comments and, sometimes it's wild takes. Sometimes they're good takes. Sometimes, everyone is in their feels when it comes to whatever their team is struggling with. And so we're trying to push, the hashtag be a fan, because season 2 for us is we want everyone to just be a fan of your team, whatever hot take you have, whatever cold take you have, whatever it might be. So this is not necessarily give me a hot take or anything, but for you, Alex, as a Chargers fan, what has being a Chargers fan meant to you in this time of being able to watch them, being able to root for them, being, having your heart broken by them? What is being a fan of the Chargers meant to you?
It's meant a lot. I think the last 2 years, especially since hiring Jim Harbaugh, this is a team that is a playoff quality team that can win games, and that's all I kind of ask for, especially coming off of the Brandon Staley era, which was not our finest moment.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, this team is headed in the right direction, and that's kind of what you can ultimately ask for as a fan. But for the love of God, for Pete's sakes, just spend the money on the offensive line. So I'm not doing the whole, hey, they're ranked 40th out of 32 offensive lines and doing all of that again next year. So they definitely can compete. They're going to compete next year. But I do think this is the offseason, like we've talked about throughout the whole show.
Right.
Put the money where your mouth is.
And
Awesome.
One kind of final question, because I laugh, because I said it when we were watching it, and then I saw you post it recently again. So I'm going to tie it into the Mike McDaniel, Greg Roman thing. Do you ever think Mike McDaniel on a 4th and 9 will call a play action?
I don't think he's going to. But
I saw that live, and I'm like, that nobody's biting on a 4th and 9 play action, at all.
Well, it's also just funny because it's not like you guys have had 3 rushing yards the whole game. I don't think they're scared of you being, the 2024 Eagles or one of these teams that can just run the ball at will for 10 yards. So yeah, I think by the end of that game, everyone was just, their brains were fried. My brain was fried. So I forgive them a little bit, but that was just a dumb play to end it on. I have never wanted to turn my TV off faster.
Yeah, no, that reminded me of the old Chiefs days where you thought you really needed a play, but instead they were just going to run that super delayed halfback draw for 2 yards. And you're like, is that really your go-to play to try to get back into this right now? Yeah. So that's what it reminded me of. But I just thought it'd be a fun little question to be like, you think you're going to have to worry about McDaniel ever doing something like that?
Never say never with Chargers coordinators, but I think we're good now.
That's a valid point. Hey, Alex, I'm so thankful for you joining. This was really cool because I've actually followed you on my personal page for a long time. So it's really cool. I just started my Chargers TikTok or X page. So that's why I was new on there. You're probably like, dude, this guy has 20 followers. What is this guy doing messaging me? So no. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on today. We'd love to have you on again. Of course. I would love to give you just a few minutes if you wanted to say anything or plug in your socials, whatever you would like to do. I'd love to give you a few moments to plug your socials and all that.
Yeah, like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at Alex Insdorf 99. Go look up the Guilty as Charged podcast on YouTube if you're not familiar with us. But yeah, upload a video once a week, do a couple podcasts on there. We're going to have a bunch of draft stuff, free agency content over the course of the offseason. So if you're interested in that for the Chargers, go check us out.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Alex, this has been a real treat to get to talk to you, man. Thank you.
Real treat to meet you guys.
Be well. Yeah. We'll see you on when we're coming up for the regular season, huh?
Definitely down to join again.
All right, cool, man.
Yeah.
Thanks,
have a good
Alex.
one, Alex. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
See
Have
ya.
a good one.
Caleb, way to go, man. What a great guy.
Yeah. That was really cool. I've always watched his stuff online, and I followed his. I love his analytics, so that's why I really follow his page. So that was really cool, man. Really
Good,
cool
man.
to talk.
It's really insightful. I'm not anywhere close to being a Chargers fan, but I appreciate all the inside of the Chargers because I'm going to have to find a Raiders fan to try to talk us up. But Alex was a good dude, man. I liked him.
Literally the only thing left now is you finding a Chargers person to get on the show. We've literally Raiders, sorry.
Yeah.
We've literally had, and we haven't, Jesse's coming back on next week. So that's another Chiefs person. So again, Cody.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah. Sorry.
I feel like nobody wants to talk about the Raiders, so maybe.
Well, they're showing up on the TikTok live, so it's just
Well, they're showing up
with
with their keyboards. I don't know about being on camera. That's a bit tougher of a
They
task
show
to
up,
ask
they say, they show up, they say Raider Nation or Raiders, and then they leave.
I encourage people who are watching right now, start tagging your favorite Raiders content creators. Tag them on our page. Tag them. Send them to us. We want them on our show. We want all teams covered as far as media personalities, content creators. So if you know of Raiders people that you want, send them our way. Tag them. Do whatever you got to do. I want a Raiders person on the show this offseason.
And I will say that Chargers guy is fantastic because, now I actually know a little bit about the Chargers. They're kind of they live in the abyss. And you know about, Herbert, you know about Harbaugh, and then, you don't even know they exist. So kind of getting a little more in-depth knowledge of the Chargers, I think, was very beneficial for at least me.
I thought he won you over when he was talking about they need a special teams returner.
Which was weird to me because
I love Darius Davis.
If Darius Davis ends up out there, Denver, that's him and Marvin Mims back there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only reason he was even saying that is just because he was so beat up this year. He was injured every week or had a knee. He had a lingering hamstring and knee injury or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a little feller, so some hits probably add up to him. But
oh yeah,
I'm gonna give. He's an electric returner. If he's healthy, I wouldn't look for
no
him.
pun intended.
For sure. Yeah.
But
I think.
Yeah, and Cody, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think what's interesting, and I think Austin and Corey, I think you two had this point a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about how the kickoff rules have changed it to now where you got to prioritize a guy that actually gets you yardage on a return or even a run back touchdown. We look at Seattle that kind of blew open the doors on, San Francisco and also field position when it came to the Rams. A lot of it was kick returning. Denver, when they put Marvin Mims in as a returner and he was able to get some good yardage back and get, Bo Nix a shorter field to work with. I think to Austin and Corey's point that you guys made a few weeks ago, returners are now just as important as they used to be. A lot of it credit to these kickoff return rules, because if you don't get in the zone, they automatically get it on the 40, I think is what it is. And if not, then you give an opportunity to a guy that can maybe break away and steal a touchdown and get your team back in the game. So I think it's really cool to see that you got to focus on not only three phases, but the returning side of it, not just field position now.
Well, and we'll see what they decide to do in the offseason. I'm sure there's going to be, more talks about the kickoffs and certain aspects of, the special teams part of it, because again, there's still loopholes that teams are figuring out with this kickoff coverage. There's still certain things that I'm sure the NFL is going to want to take care of, and it'll be a very interesting offseason as far as what the rules committee decides to do as far as that goes. Caleb, how'd you feel tonight hosting your first show? Do you feel official now?
I was definitely choppy, but it was good. I enjoyed it. Hopefully I get the hang of it. But yeah, I enjoyed it, man. I enjoyed it.
So let's do a little recap. Last night, thank you again to everyone. DJ, Derek Johnson joined it last night. Guys, it's been a pretty fun week, really. So let's reflect on. Let's do a little reflection. Matt, how you feeling the day after?
Oh, I feel great. We had a nice little conversation before the show. I feel great. It was nice to talk to DJ. And it was awesome, man. I told all my friends about it. So it was nice to be called, hey, thanks, brothers. So
hell yeah. And day after for you?
Yeah, dude, I was still just I didn't even want to work today. Well, that's most days, but less so today. I'm like, dude, why am I working today? I just talked to Derek Johnson. why do I have to clock back into a job? But here we are. And then, we get to talk to Alex with the Chargers. So no rest for the wicked. Obviously, last night was incredibly special for myself. So probably not going to forget that for a while. But, to immediately follow that up with an episode with Alex and dive into the Chargers, I mean, it's fun, boys.
And season 1 officially comes to an end Sunday morning, boys.
Wouldn't it be after this?
Crazy. This season has just flown by.
Oh, yeah, that's our
last episode of season 1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Matt,
Wild.
how excited are you for our end of season 1 Super Bowl preview live pregame show Sunday morning?
I mean, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to do the show and to say, like, hey, guys, we just did a full season, and it's been great. And honestly, each and every one of us has had some kind of special moment on this show. Obviously, Austin yesterday getting to talk to Derek Johnson, who, has been his favorite player since the dawn of time. Me getting to talk to Garrett Bowles, who both our children are struggling with their difficulties. And he's, hopefully he gets Walter Payton Man of the Year tomorrow. But getting to relate to Garrett Bowles on that, Caleb getting to meet Carl Pickens, and then Cody anyway. But no, we did get to bring a Raider on. We had
David Emerson.
Yeah, David Emerson on. So each of us has had some kind of special moment. And then again, can't forget Dick Vermeil. Like, that was the first guest we had on the show, and how awesome it was to get to talk to him. So yeah, I'm excited to see this.
And Cody get the fertilizer of the future coach. So
yeah, sometimes you just got to throw out all that old dirt, even if the old dirt is new. So,
So I will say, everyone watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button up top. Make sure you tune in Sunday morning pregame show, Super Bowl Sunday. Again, it's the end of season 1 for us, but it pretty much starts up next week. Again, I'd love to say there's some rest in there, but we got guests next week. So again, we can't thank you guys enough for everything that you've done for our show, and continue to share everything out for us and push everything out. We love interacting with you guys on the TikTok lives, even when Matt and I don't do well with trolls all the time, but we're working on that. So Cody, I really do want to, I appreciate, that was a fantastic Be a Fan moment at the end of the episode tonight. I'd like to find a way for us to incorporate that with all of our guests that we have on some point, and also with the chat. So with that being said, Caleb, it's your first time hosting, so I'm gonna let you do the first time closing this out.
Heck yeah. So to close this out, I just want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors. So shout out to Bite Eye Coffee again. I got to do my hand posing, but
there you go.
Shout out to Bite Eye Coffee.
Gotta cup it.
I know. Yeah, I got to cup it. Shout out to Rival Codes as well. Get all your Rival Codes merch. All you have to do, you go to rivalcodes.com and use codes RIVALS10 for 10% off your order today. Shout out to Austin. Austin's wearing his Rival Code shirt. Also, big shout out and thank you to Field Ops Kansas. They have been a supporter for a long time, actually longer than I've actually been here. So big shout out to Field Ops. We really appreciate them and everything Troy and them do. So appreciate them. Also, thank you to Angie and her team at Emporia State Federal Credit Union. It's the War Room's banking of choice as well as the Shovic's banking of choice. And then shout out to the main man, Jeff, at JBW Solutions. Matt's got the hat on, as well as Corey and Austin. So big shout out to them. We're obviously in the JBW Solutions studio. So yeah, thank you all. And thank you all for being patient for our last show. And I hope y'all have a good one.
See you, everybody.